So it's actually very interesting how technology is taking a lot of the grunt work out of investment banking, which allows the real investment bankers to focus on the important stuff, which is, the negotiations and the closing of the deals, the more personal stuff. There is a good company in Japan, which is a good president, called M&A Research Institute, which is a listed M&A. It's a listed company, and
Okay.
it's a similar business, and we're following basically the same path as they had. And they closed 150 deals last year.
Wow.
And they made $60 million of revenue. And it's a very profitable business model.
Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to the Asia Tech Podcast. Marcus Yeung, a co-founder and managing partner at Match.Asia, and the founder of Seabridge Partners is with us today. Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My
How
pleasure.
are you today?
I'm good. I'm very, very good to see you again, Michael.
It's very nice to have you here. I was thinking this morning, literally as I was washing dishes, how long have we known each other? Do you know? And do you even remember how we met? Because I was thinking, I feel like I've known this guy my whole life, but we didn't go to summer camp together. We didn't go to college together.
Well, we're probably about the same age, so we're close. But we've known each other a long time, Michael. I really can't remember when we first met, but I remember we have a thing in common, which is that we both are very close to Japan. And you spent a lot of time in Japan. I think you worked there, and I also worked in Japan for a long, long time. And then I remember leaving Japan probably 10, 12 years ago, and then looking you up and meeting in Bangkok, and you were just starting getting your feet on the ground there. And look at you now. Look how well you're doing now. So isn't it wonderful to see how things are going well on your side?
So it actually is kind of funny. We met in person, didn't we?
We did. We met in some coffee shop, which was attached to a very fancy fitness club and health center. And you looked very relaxed and enjoying your new life.
It was a long time
to do some work. Yeah.
It was a long time ago. I think I've gone bald 4 times in between that time and today. So hopefully, I think we're both lucky we still have our hair. So Tell me more about you, right? You said you were in Japan, but give me a little bit more of your background just for some context.
Yeah, so I've been around for a long time. I mean, as I said, we're quite similar. I've been in the industry for 30 years. So basically, I'm British, but I was born in America, but managed to get rid of my American passport a few years ago, which I think I probably talked to you about sometime last time we spoke. But I'm British, and but spent most of my career actually in Asia. Started off in London as a junior banker. With a very old, established British merchant bank called S.G. Warburg, and then spent 10 years in banking in Asia, in Japan, in Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, and then eventually went to the buy side, joined Singapore Power, a big corporate, as a CFO of their international arm in charge of acquisitions. And then I joined the private equity fund, the Carlyle Group, set up their buyout fund in Japan, which you may remember back in the early 2000s. Did that for a few years. It's now the biggest fund in Japan by a long way. And then I went full circle and became an entrepreneur. And then I became a failed entrepreneur. And then I eventually decided I need to make some money, and I came back to Singapore and set up Seabridge, which is an investment banking boutique focusing on technology. And that's been going very well, and we've really had a lot of tailwinds behind us, and we've really carved out a nice little niche for us. And then eventually, I managed to go again as an entrepreneur to set up Match.Asia with a co-founder called Patrick.
I want to get to that in a second. I'm curious about a few things, though. What was it like working at Carlyle? I don't know anybody else that's done that, and it has this very specific type of reputation. And I'm just curious what it was like there. And then to grow it into the biggest fund in Japan is pretty impressive anyway. But go ahead. I'm really curious.
Yeah, I had the best time ever in Carlyle. I remember being interviewed for Carlyle. I had to fly around the world because they had 3 founders. And one at the time was based in Washington, and the other happened to be in London, and the other one happened to be in, I think, Tokyo, and another was in Singapore. So I had to actually fly around the world to interview with the 3 founders. At that time, Carlyle was a unlisted entity. It was a very small firm of around 200 professionals. Now I believe it's listed, of course, and it's probably thousands of investors,
Yeah.
investment professionals. Um, Fantastic firm, very family type, really nice people, very American, um, and but really smart, very switched on, and they have fantastic connections. I can't say enough about Carlisle. It was fantastic training for me.
Yeah, I remember when it started. I forget who the founders are, but I remember them coming out of government and just seeming like it was just this inevitable track to success for them because they were just so well connected when they started this firm. Yeah.
That's right, very well connected, and they were very connected in politics, and they were very strong with the government and presidents, and were on their Rolodex, prime ministers. When I was there, I met probably two presidents and three prime ministers.
Wow.
I think it was $1 million per handshake, or maybe it was $5 million per handshake. Their fundraising machine. Every time the investors shook hands with a president, they would bring out, it's $5 million commitment, and you get to take a picture with President Bush or something like that.
Wow. That's the part that I wanted to know. Like, it must have just been surreal at some point, right? Can I ask you this too? I talk about this a lot, particularly as I get older. I feel like I was born like at the exact right time and date. I really do. Because I'm pretty sure that if I'd been born 5 years later, like I never would have had the career I had on Wall Street. And I put that in quotes, right? And if I'd been born 5 years earlier, I probably would have ended up being a lawyer, right? Just because all the internationalization stuff that we got to take advantage of, I thought happened just right at the right time, right? Like I went and studied in Japan. I came back. The Japanese market was growing apparently. And then I got expatriated there and I've never been home since. And kind of like you, I've traveled all over the world. And you said you're British, but you were born in America. Like I feel like we were born at like just the perfect time. What do you think?
I agree. I think we've seen a lot of changes in the 30 years of work we've had, but
Yeah.
even before then, just a guy like you, an American, ending up in Thailand and in Japan for the longest time, a Brit like myself, spending all of my time in Japan, now in Singapore. It's
Yeah.
quite amazing. I think the thing about our generation, just for your listeners, which is probably different from other generations before it, is that we were probably the first generation which had to change our careers in the middle of our,
Yeah.
in the middle of our career span.
Yeah.
My parents would work for the same company for forever, but most of the people I know had to change their career. They were investment bankers to start off with, and then afterwards, because investment banking, you come in and you get spat out once you get senior enough. You've got to reinvent yourself, and that's really hard. Some people can do it, and some people struggle. So I think we were the first guys to have to really reinvent ourselves. And secondly, we were probably the first generation who could really choose wherever we wanted to work in the world, wherever took our fancy. We could pack up our bags and go there. And that's such a
I mean, I
privilege.
remember I don't talk about this a lot, but I essentially automated myself out of a job, right?
Yes.
So I took all of the sort of fintech stuff. I automated so many things at work that at some point it was just really easy to get rid of me. And that was in my mid to late 40s. And I knew it was coming because I knew when I was doing it that at some point the end of the road was going to be them going, thanks a lot, bye, kind of thing, right? So I was kind of psychologically prepared for it and I didn't really care. But I remember sitting with my wife after I lost my last job and just going, where should we live?
Mm.
And you're right, it could have been anywhere. And I did look. I looked at Taiwan. I looked at Vietnam. I looked at Singapore. It was too expensive for me. I looked at Hong Kong. It was too expensive for me because I still had to send my daughter to college. I mean, to high school. And we were just like, you know what? We've been going to Thailand for vacation for 10 years. The schools there are great. The medical care there is amazing. It's really safe. And the weather's ridiculous. Let's go to Thailand. And I've just, my daughter graduated from high school 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember anymore. And now she's at university. But like I stayed because I love it here. And it's such an amazing place to live. But you're right. I could have gone anywhere. And I think that's new. That was definitely new for us for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and probably wherever you went, you would have been successful. You can choose many different countries, and you just put your roots down and you keep nose to the wall and keep grinding away, and you'll eventually spread your roots and you'll grow, blossom. So
Can I ask you this? How long did it take for you to get Seabridge Partners to a point where you felt like it was stable? Does that make sense?
I don't within so Seabridge Partners, just for your listeners, is a investment banking boutique
Yep.
focusing on technology. Um, and I think we've carved out a pretty good niche that we're probably one of the better known um, technology focused boutiques. But I would never say it's stable. And part of the
Okay.
reasons, part of the reason why we set up Match.Asia was because I wanted to, as I get older, to have a more stable platform to work off. The reason why it's not stable is because you are limited by the number of deals you can do, and you're also subject to the movements of the market, um,
Yeah.
and it's really very much a feast or famine. One year we'll have a fantastic year, close a few deals, we'll all be off in Phuket and enjoying ourselves on extended holidays. The next year, I'm worrying about, can I pay my school fees? How can I make ends meet? How am I going to pay for my staff? It's really
Right.
hard, um, and I think that's one of the problem with boutiques, and that's one of the problem with M&A and fundraising, which is what I do.
Yeah.
Um, it's really hard. It's very manual, and therefore it's not really scalable. And that's again one of the reasons why I set up the other business, Match.Asia.
Yeah. So the reason why I asked, right, is because it took me about 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, to get to a point, what are we, 2024? Yeah, pretty much. It took me about 10 years to get to a point where like I thought I had a business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. When you're running your own business, you never feel like it's stable. You're always just like, I'm having lobster and steak tonight, and tomorrow night, am I going to be able to eat kind of thing? It's not that drastic, but it sometimes feels like that. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
talk to me about just this entrepreneurial spirit in you, right? You said you kind of said it half jokingly, like you were a failed entrepreneur before. And what is it like? What does it take to get you to come back into the market? I mean, we're both in our 50s, right? I'm probably actually closer to 60, but like, what does it take for you to come back into the market and start all over again?
Well, I think there's a couple of questions there. What's it like setting up a startup in your 50s? I'll
Yeah.
talk about that later on. It's really, really hard. Um, but um, but how did I get to where I am? I think it's a long-winded, it's a long story, and I like to look at it in a positive spin. I
Tell me.
think it's a little bit like evolving. You imagine the monkey moving into the ape moving into hopefully a standing a human being, and eventually being an investment banker and then an entrepreneur. I hope I'm evolving, um, but it's been hard. I think the way I started off was basically as part of a cog in the wheel in an investment bank. Um, and you get to learn your trade, and you learn your skills, but you don't really have any responsibility, and you don't really understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a false environment you're in. You're making a lot of money, spending a lot of money, but you're not really in control of your destiny. And eventually, when you get senior enough, you get, as you said, you get pushed out of the sausage machine, and you get pushed out at the end, and you have to figure out what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Um, if you're lucky, then there are other parts which you still have, and so I went onto the buy side, which was a new experience, and that's really exciting. Um, and then because there was so much capital coming into the market in the last 10, 20 years, the obvious thing was go onto the buy side and try and manage some of that money. And so I went and joined Carlyle, and we took advantage of the fact there was a lot of money looking for this for places to put it. And so we set up a big fund, and we raised a lot of money. We started putting that to work, and that was very interesting as well. But again, semi-satisfying because you're working for other people at the end of the day,
Right.
because 80% of the profits which you make goes to your LPs, 20% of it goes to you, and then you have to share that with all of your team. And then, of course,
Yeah.
Carlyle will take a big portion of that. So it's nice, and I think it's a nice, steady, stable environment, but it's not really, controlling your own destiny. And so
Yeah.
what I did then was set up my own boutique in Japan because I love Japan. I wanted to stay in Japan, um, which wasn't a great move because, of course, Japan in those days, as you remember, Michael has been trading sideways, if not downwards, and
Yeah.
so it's difficult to actually make serious money in Japan because the market is just moving against you.
Yeah.
Um, and then I decided to take things in my own hands, and because I had a little bit of capital behind me, I said, "Let's go and do something really crazy." And I set up a business called Concept Bank, which was really trying to bring big concepts back into Japan, which is a big market. did a few concepts there, eventually set up a smoothie chain, believe it or not, food and
Like
beverage
that.
chain,
I remember.
and raised quite a lot of money and lost most of it, including a lot of my own money, my family's money, and it was just very hard.
Yeah,
But a
it's
lot of
hard.
good lessons learned. And
Yep.
then I realized that I realized the folly of my ways and what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong. And I realized that you really have to, if you want to really control your own destiny, you have to build a business around the core strength, which at that point in time was my own experience. And you have to also be in a market which is growing. So I had to leave Japan because I didn't believe as a foreigner in Japan I could really, make a big difference. And so
Yeah.
I came to Singapore, which is growing, has been growing for the last 10, 15 years. Southeast Asia is growing. The tailwinds are all there. I also decided to move into tech, which obviously is growing as well. And then I also decided to take advantage of my own strengths, which is basically my investment banking expertise and my founder expertise as well. And that's why I set up a boutique. And since then, it's been moving in the right direction. And then it's just a case of figuring out how you run your business. And I think I've adopted a strategy of really trying to give, and just trying to network as much as I can, but to give, and hoping that once you plant enough seeds, then eventually karma will work its way, and eventually you'll be rewarded.
I have to agree with you here. One of the things that I've learned by running my own business as well is I never ask for anything from anybody at first, ever. I really don't. I don't ask them to sponsor the show. I don't ask them to do anything. I'm just like, I just want you to be on the show and have the listeners in like 173 countries learn about what you do. That's it. Yeah. And you're right. I think stuff comes around.
I think that is so un-investment banking. I always joke with my team because we really try and adopt a personal philosophy of ours, which is mine, which is integrity, humility, and gratitude. And in investment banking, as you were a trader, if I remember correctly, and you don't have gratitude, you are not humble, and you have no integrity at all. And that's why your life span or your career span is very short, and you burn out. I think there's a better way of doing it, and I think
I agree.
If you give, you will eventually receive, and I really adopt that mantra, and I think that you should just give as much as you can, and eventually somebody will. Obviously, people will like working with you, and eventually opportunities will come your way, and hopefully everybody wins.
I used to say when I first started doing this business that I had lost my soul when I was on Wall Street, and I really do believe that, and maybe that's why I feel like in my head. Like if I don't look in the mirror, I still think 25 to 30 years old. That's the feeling. That's the spirit I have inside me. And I feel like that's because I got my soul back after I left. Instead of just like running around, for me personally, right, and chasing money, now I'm just trying to like build a decent business. Anyway, I want to talk about this transformation into Match.Asia. Maybe you can talk about what that is, why you started it, and what it's meant to do, and maybe how it dovetails with Seabridge, if it does it all, yeah?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like Seabridge 2.0. I think every industry as we know it has been disrupted and will be disrupted. And I think investment banking is being disrupted as we speak. And I think it's about time every part of investment banking. I mean, you used to be a trader, now people don't. It's all automated now. Traders don't exist anymore. Equity salesmen don't exist anymore. Equity research doesn't exist anymore, which was the hottest part of the industry when you and I joined. So, I think investment banking is now being disrupted, and I think Match.Asia is one of the ways which investment banking will be disrupted. So Match.Asia sounds like a dating site. Actually, it's a little bit. It is a bit of a dating site. It's basically a corporate dating site. So it's a marketplace for M&A. So it's the leading M&A matching platform for sellers and buyers. We have hundreds of sellers on our platform, and we have hundreds of buyers on our platform. And the idea is that we are really trying to democratize M&A, so bringing M&A to SMEs, small medium enterprises in Southeast Asia, so that for the first time they have the opportunity to really meet and get on the radar screen of a lot of buyers. And before that, these SMEs really weren't on the radar screen of any of these buyers because the financial advisors like my old firm, Seabridge, didn't have the time or the energy to really spend time on these things. And having said that, there were, I think the stat is 17 million SMEs in Southeast Asia, 17 million,
Wow.
and probably only, there are a lot of mom and pop shops in here, but I would say, let's say there were a million decent sized companies out there. And so what we're trying to do is take the top 100,000 and get them onto our platform so that investors, whether they're financial investors, growth capital funds, late stage venture capital funds, family offices, micro PE funds, entrepreneurs who want to take over existing businesses, they have the opportunity to really find these companies and to partner with them and eventually take them over. And that's really very important for the whole ecosystem of SMEs in Southeast Asia. And that's basically what we're trying to do, and use tech to allow us to do it.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to follow up on. You mentioned earlier, right, that Seabridge and companies like Seabridge, boutique investment banks, have a hard time scaling, right? Because there's just only a certain number of people and a certain number of deals you can work on every year. You could automate some of the back end processes, but it's going to be hard to automate finding all the right deals and getting the right people. So how does Match.Asia, like, what does the tech do? In a way, you say it's like a dating site. So that's cool. I have a business I want to sell. I put it on Match.Asia. I presume that that's free, right? Because,
Yes.
right.
So, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. But what does the tech do to try to make sure that as a buyer, I can find the business I want to buy, and as a seller, I can find the guys and the gals that want to buy my business? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just stepping back a little bit, the M&A process or the fundraising process is similar. There are basically three different parts to the process. The first one is preparing the company for M&A or for selling. The second one is finding an investor or matching with an investor. And the third one, once you found the investor, then is actually closing the deal. A typical deal would take anything from 6 months, maybe to 9 months. If you're lucky, it might take as long as 12 months. And interesting enough, 70% of that time frame is actually in the preparation, and then the matching part. The matching is probably half of the whole. 1 month for the preparation, 5 months for matching, and then 2 months for closing.
And when you talk about prep, I just want to understand this. You're talking about like getting all the books and records in order, getting all your like documents in order. So when someone goes, "Where's this thing? Where's that thing?" It doesn't take months to find. You're just like, "Here's the packet," kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes, it's basically cleaning up your house, making sure that everything is where it should be, fixing the holes in the walls, fixing the roof, but also getting your documentation right, and
Right.
then making sure that the story is correct. So in other words, figuring out who you are and who you want to sell to, making sure that your investment story is there. And a good investment banker should be able to get that company ready within a month. And the story is there, the numbers supported, all of the documents are there. And then you should be able to go out to market and then figure out and then try and match with the right investors. And that would take anything from 2 months, if you're lucky, to 4 or 5 months, or even a year if the market's against you. Now, interesting enough, that preparation phase and that matching phase is actually not really investment banking work. It's more business development. Anybody can do it. Accountants can do it. Lawyers can do it. Business development guys can do it. And so in Seabridge, we have an investment banking team, and we would spend 70% of our time on non-investment banking work and only 30% of our time on investment banking work.
Right.
And these investment bankers are very expensive. And so it wasn't a very efficient use of our time. So what we wanted to do was really change the dynamics. Instead of being in Seabridge, I could work on 10 deals and hopefully close 2 or 3 of them if I'm lucky. And then we'd make, a couple of $1 million for our fees. And then I'm very happy and I can go and spend 6 months of the year in Phuket. But if we didn't close any, then I'd be, eating in the food court in Singapore. And then, and it really is not quite like that, but it's similar.
But it's kind of binary, though.
Yeah, it is binary. Now, imagine if that you turned it on its head and you basically had, similar to property sites, where you have, in the old days you would go and put property on a in the the front in the shop, and then you'd have all of the listings on the front.
Yeah.
If you walk past, you'd actually see the pictures, and then you go in and you say, I want to go and look at that property. It's so manual. That's basically how M&A is done today. So
Yeah.
what we want to do is basically put it on a marketplace. And so the first part of the tech is really just to get a big marketplace, and the same in the way dating is done now online, same that property is done online, same the way that shopping is done online. We have a marketplace. Not that complicated to do, but it's very complicated to populate that marketplace and to have hundreds of sellers and hundreds of buyers. And so far we've got 200 sellers, and we've been at it for 3 or 4 months. We've got 200 engaged sellers, which is really, really good.
Wow.
And then by the end of the year, we should have about 500, and by next year we should have about 1,000 sellers on our platform. And by that time, we should be, really, really hitting our stride. So the first part is the getting the marketplace up and running. The second part is driving traffic through to the marketplace once you've got enough inventory. And then you've got all sorts of other things where technology can change the way the process is done. When I was a junior banker, I spent a lot of time doing, company research reports and doing what they call teasers, and then doing the information memos, and then doing the financial models, and then doing valuation. This is what interns and associates now are training at the universities. This is what they do, and they're very proud. I can do a financial model, in a week, and I'm saying that's great. But did you know I can press a button now and actually do a financial model using OpenAI in 15 seconds? And then their face kind of drops, and they go, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yes. And by the way, you know that valuation work and the DCF work and all of that, comparable multiples, which you did. Yeah, I can now do that online, and I can just press a button, and I can do a beautiful report within 15 seconds." And they go, "Oh my God." And all of that, reports which you've done, company research, and you sit in the meetings and writing the meeting notes. Now we've got, again, AI or meeting notes, which can all basically, download listen to what you've done and summarize it, and then feed it into our CRM system. You don't even have to attend the meeting anymore, and you don't even actually have to write the teasers, because I can do that now. So it's actually very interesting how technology is taking a lot of the grunt work out of investment banking, which allows the real investment bankers to focus on the important stuff, which is, the negotiations and the closing of the deals, the more personal stuff.
Are you surprised by how much the artificial intelligence stuff can actually do for you? And like, I can hear in your voice that you know exactly how to do this. You've taught yourself how to go through this whole process. You're not just pulling things out of thin air and making it up. I can tell you for myself, while you were talking about meeting notes and all this kind of stuff, in my head, I was running through the processes that I do for each one of those things and just going, yeah, that works. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like even for some of the summaries that I write for the podcast, I give it to Otter to do the transcript. I take that transcript and then I turn it into a summary, which I prompt myself, so I know what kind of summary I want. But when I can do that while I'm having a cup of coffee.
Yeah. And all you have to do
it's really good. Say
it's
again?
really good. And all you have to do is edit it at the end. And so
yeah.
instead of a whole day,
right.
It takes 15 minutes of your time to really edit and curate it.
I never use it as is, right? And I don't think you do either, but I will edit. I look at it and go, I wouldn't write like that. I wouldn't use that word. I'll take that out. That's way too demonstrative or whatever. And I take it out, right? Because AI is like very excited about stuff. I don't know why it's so excited. I'm not that excited.
Yeah,
but
no, I think it's, I'm not surprised, and I think it's about time. I am surprised how, there's two other ways which I do think is really exciting. One is they have a lot of co-pilots now. So the idea of being able to conduct due diligence with a co-pilot, in other words, typing into, it's like a Google search engine, and say, give me the latest 3 years, or actually you can even just type in and say, give me a financial report on this company, and it will do all of the analysis for you and check all the due, and just, focus on, do some due diligence on the legal aspects of this company, and dig around and give me a due diligence report. I don't think you can do that now, but I wouldn't be surprised within the next year, you will have very good results coming out of that, because it's all about the data. At the moment, the data doesn't exist.
right.
But once you get the data in there, then the technology can really make it very, very powerful. And then the matching is also another thing. what we can do now is, based upon the data we have on buyers and on sellers, we don't even have to think about it ourselves. Once a new buyer comes on board or a new seller comes on board, we will automatically generate 5 or 6 leads based upon of buyers, based upon what we know about each of these, and we don't even have to look at it. It's all automatically done.
So in the old days, you would have to like look at a new company. Somebody would come to you and say, "I want to sell my, paperclip company." You'd be like, "Who do I know that wants to buy a paperclip company?" You'd have to like go through a whole bunch of files and folders to try to find it, or even just like search for this. Yeah. But now you just put it up on the platform and just go do your thing, and it comes up with like 5 people that have already noted that they want to buy paperclip companies.
Absolutely.
That's the way that works. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's amazing.
The trick is really that the paperclip company, there's not a lot of data on that paperclip company, and therefore we need to, what our value add is, it's really calling all of the paperclip companies in Southeast Asia, getting the data which we need to accumulate so that they will be found by investors. And that's something which is manual, and you can't automate that. And that's something which we've taken onto ourselves, really just going out and calling and just getting the data and make it easy for them and selling to them and saying, basically, if you can give us your data, we can introduce you to lots of buyers, and they like to do it.
Yeah, I want to make a point about the artificial intelligence, if you don't mind. This is just my opinion. I'm curious what yours is too. I'm not afraid of it. And what I mean by that is it allows me to do the parts of my job. I don't really have a job, but you know what I mean? The stuff that I do in my business that I really love. And you're right, it takes away the drudgery, because I let just the machine do the drudgery, and I get to do this thing and talk to you. And when I'm done, I'm let the machine like do all the other things that I don't want to do. Is that true as well for you?
I think it is true, but I think you and I are one of the top 20% who actually can really not feel too challenged by what AI is doing. I think 80% of the world will be disrupted in terms of the value which they're adding in their jobs will be disrupted, and will not be in a position to really take control of the AI and the advantage. So I think we're lucky in that respect, and I think the younger generation today, I think, has a very tough job because they need to stay ahead of the curve all the time, because it's just staying ahead of the curve is just so hard because technology is changing everything so quickly. So good luck to them.
You mentioned earlier that for Seabridge, and you were kind of half joking, but if you could work on 10 deals a year and close 2 or 3 of them, right? That's a really good year.
Yeah.
How do you see Match.Asia changing those numbers? Like, can you work on 100 deals a year now?
Yeah. So the numbers would be something like, when we hit critical size, which would be in the next year, I would imagine, we should have 1,000 deals on our platform. 1,000 companies 1,000 sellers on our platform who want to sell, and we should be able to close probably 50 of those deals a year, and our team is not going to be much bigger than it was at Seabridge. So it's just a much smarter way of scaling, using a marketplace model to really, and technology to really allow us to reach out to many more sellers and many more buyers. And the secret, I think, is that in the old days in investment banking, you're trying to sell all the time. You're trying to basically, it doesn't matter what you're selling, you're trying to sell it to a buyer, and the buyer doesn't want to buy it. And half the time you're wasting your time because you're trying to sell a circle and push it into a square, and it just doesn't work. And I think Match.Asia changes that, because we allow the seller and buyer to match themselves, and we don't have to try and match them. They can match themselves, and that saves their time and effort, and they don't have to listen to boring bankers like us who are trying to sell them things which they aren't interested in. They can actually go and find out what they want. And I think that's something which is quite disruptive in terms of what we're doing.
So have you raised money for this, right? Because you mentioned that it's almost like, you said a dating site, but that's kind of, you're joking around, but it's almost like a house listing or a real estate site, right? Where there wasn't a marketplace before, now there is. I presume you do a lot of due diligence and vetting before you allow someone to be on the platform, right? So unlike real estates where like the more listings you have, the better, in a way for you, it's like not the fewer listings, but you want to curate the number of listings so that everything there is actually valid and real. Let's just put that aside. But if that's the case, have you raised money? Is this a business where you think you can actually go out and raise venture capital money? Because the one thing that I think that the marketplaces, the real estate marketplaces got wrong was they were never involved in the transaction. I never understood why, right? So what you're doing is you're saying, come on, and we'll help you close that transaction, because that's actually one of the hardest parts, is actually getting it to close. Is that a fundable business, you think? Because if every house trades for like, let's say an average of $500,000, every business that trades is probably going to sell for somewhere between $7 and $10 million. I'm just making up numbers, right? But it's way higher than 500 grand. So that means you can do fewer deals and make way more money, right? Yeah. And you're involved in the transaction. So how does that look for you from a funding perspective?
Yeah, you've knocked it on the head. I mean, it's an incredibly lucrative business model because of the numbers. So I think when any investor looks at it and if they believe what we're saying, they will say, wow, this is incredible. And there are some, there is a good company in Japan, which is a good precedent, called M&A Research Institute, which is a listed M&A, it's a listed company, and it's a similar business, and we're following basically the same path as they had. And they closed 150 deals last year.
Wow.
And they made $60 million of revenue. And it's a very profitable business model. They're at about 55% EBITDA. So they made about $35 million in profit. And believe it or not, their market cap is $2 billion.
Go for it, man.
Yeah. So I think
that's a lot of time in Phuket, by the way. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's something unheard of for boutiques, and selling your boutique for $2 billion just doesn't happen. So that's one of the reasons why, to answer another question of yours, why in my 50s I've decided to go and start up a business, because I just couldn't resist. It was just, I've seen so many startups, and I've helped fund so many startups that all of the boxes were ticked in this. And I said, well, look, I'm going to do it myself, because this is just something I cannot resist. And it's been hard work, but it's been a lot of fun. Going back to your other question in terms of are we raising capital? We don't need a lot of money to do this, to be honest. So I've basically been funding it with my partner, Patrick.
Good for you.
But a lot of strategic investors have shown interest in us. Big financial strategic investors have shown interest in us, because we are opening up a market which they would love to have. So Southeast Asian M&A with SMEs is something which the Japanese, the Koreans, the Chinese, a lot of the big strategic investors are looking to build businesses through acquiring other businesses in the region. And so we are speaking to some very big players who would like to invest in us. And also we are speaking to some of the other marketplaces around the region who are also saying, look, we've got a marketplace in Japan, but they want to come into Southeast Asia. So, why don't we come and join forces? So we are open to partnership discussions. If anybody wants to partner with us, we are absolutely on for it. We very much believe in a win-win situation for everybody. We believe that everybody can win through our platform, whether you're a seller, a buyer, an intermediary, or even an investor. We think that there's so much value which we can create. We're happy to partner with anybody.
Super. Marcus Yeung, a co-founder and managing partner of Match.Asia and the founder of Seabridge Partners. Thank you so much for doing that. And let's do this as well. You said like in 6 months or 9 months, you're going to have like 500, maybe even 1,000 sellers or buyers on the platform. I'd love for you to come back and talk to me about some of the things that have happened, 6 to 9 months out, so that we can actually see like a real transaction happen and see what it feels like, and see if all the things that you thought were going to happen, what you learned along the way. Oh, we forgot to build that little piece kind of thing. But I know you will build it. But like the little things you learn as something kind of goes through the system, I'd love to do that too. Thank you so much again for doing this.
Not at all. Thanks very much for your time.